All right, Stephen. Western Digital has a fun new drive on the market. The DC HS760 data center drive is a traditional rotating disk that has some pretty impressive throughput numbers. I said traditional, but it's that way in all but one sense, because the HS760 is actually a dual actuator drive. That means that it has two read and write heads. In fact, the drive in the operating system shows up as two separate, distinct 10 terabyte hard drives that are both addressable by the system. That means that it has up to 582 megabits per second of I/O throughput, which is pretty impressive for a traditional rotating drive. It also is aimed at workloads that have a pretty even mix of read and write performance, as opposed to being overly balanced in one direction or the other, which might have you go to a different solution. Stephen, it's been a while since we've heard about innovation in the traditional rotating media department. What's the advantage of having two read and write heads?
Yeah, this concept of dual actuator drives is something that we've been looking at and expecting for quite a long time. Actually, back in at Storage Field Day 19, which was back in 2020, we actually went to Western Digital and had a presentation from them called "Continuing Hard Disk Drive Innovation from Western Digital." I'll put the link to that video in the show notes. That discussion actually presages all of what we're going to talk about here today. Essentially, there's some actually kind of cool innovation happening in hard disk drives. There's energy assisted media, which means basically heat or microwave assisted to make the spots on the drive smaller. There are various shingled and perpendicular and traditional media recording, which is a little bit more iffy, especially when you ask enthusiasts about shingled. There's also NAND flash being embedded on hard drives now to accelerate data access, which is very popular. And this drive includes that technology, by the way. And then there's zoned storage and multi-actuator drives. So essentially what this means is, as many of you know, a hard disk drive, if you open that thing up, there's multiple platters. Each platter has its own read-write head on its own little arm that goes back and forth. Back, about 5 years ago, the Western Digital and Seagate both said, what would be cool is if we could break that and have two sets of actuators that can move independently and access different things at different times, because that way you can increase the I/O capability of the drive without significantly hurting the overall throughput. Because otherwise you essentially have all those heads moving together all the time across 8 or 9 platters. And that's what they've done here. So Seagate did it first a couple years back with their Exos 2X drives. Now we've got Western Digital shipping a drive that has this technology as well. It's very useful in data center and cloud environments, because one of the challenges there is that you want more IOPS, but yet you want the power and capacity efficiency and, frankly, cost efficiency of spinning media. And so by doing this, you can basically double the number of disk drives you effectively have in the system, which gives you more I/O, and yet at the same time not having to totally rearrange, re-engineer the system. That's one reason that this drive was launched quietly. It's basically being built and sold into hyperscalers because they're the ones who need this capability and they're the ones who can handle it. It's not something you're going to find on the shelves of your local Best Buy, probably ever. Maybe you can order yourself one at Newegg eventually, but essentially these drives are for special purpose applications that need disk drives that can handle more I/O, and the combination of NAND and multi-actuator gives them that capability. So as a storage nerd, as you can see, I'm nerding out. I'm excited by this. As a not storage nerd, you're probably saying, okay, cool. But it is kind of cool. It is kind of cool. It shows that there's some life in hard drives. One more thing I'll mention is that we have also had the hard disk drive companies announcing that they are indeed pushing forward with capacity, where we're going to have 30 terabyte and even 50 terabyte drives coming out soon, which is absolutely insane and awesome. And I can't wait to see those things get announced too. So stay tuned on the rundown.